This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hey everyone, it's Alexa Linton here, and you're on the Whole Horse Podcast. Today on the podcast, I am welcoming back Jackson Holm. We're going to be getting a little bit more into the equine dentistry work and chatting about teeth and a lot of different things today. And I think it's actually perfect timing, Jackson, as I was saying earlier. Because it looks like Diva has a little abscess in her tooth right now, which is brand new to me. I'm just going to pick up my Chihuahua, who's whining at me. Come here. And now wants to play keep away. Thanks, Jackson, for being here.
I knew that was going to happen.
Time. Well, we do our animal things. Mm-hmm. It's great to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be back and do some more talking. I'm sure I always am worried I'm not going to have enough time to talk about anything or not know what to talk about, and I know we always go over. So
yeah, exactly. I don't think we're going to have trouble with that. And today I think, we chatted a little bit before the call, and Jackson knows that I just had my facial bones class in osteopathy, so I am have a little bit of curiosity going there, and because of what's going on with Diva. That we are going to get a little bit into this idea of how important it is to have veterinary assistance and good care for horse teeth.
Yes.
So Jackson, do you want to just give us a little, if anybody hasn't listened to Jackson's first podcast, I cannot remember the episode, but go back through at wholehorse.ca and have a listen. But Jackson, give us a little micro introduction to you and your work, so people know, and then we'll start getting into that stuff.
All right, so I guess I've been around horses. I mean, if you listen to the other podcasts, it's probably gonna be a little bit of broken record, but this stuff needs to be some kind of pounded into people's heads sometimes as far as the dentistry stuff goes, I'm finding. But yeah, I've just always been around horses. I showed horses and kind of got into the dentistry because I was interested in improving performance for my horses I was showing. My first word was horse. And then I was looking at going to dentistry schools and did a bit of research and had a few on my list. One was a little bit closer, and that's where a bunch of people I know from the area had gone. Excuse me. Then looked at a different one, and it was completely different and just seemed to the school I went to, the Natural Balance Dentistry, or it's neuromuscular dentistry now. And just the approach that they had seemed to just fit what I'd been working from for all these years. Mm-hmm. And took a just leap into it with blind faith, and it worked out awesome. And here we are. I'm trying to think how many years it's been now. 3-ish or 4? 3.
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
nice.
Introduction.
Yeah, right on. And dentistry, as I was equine dentistry, slightly controversial topic. I think it was, but also super of interest. So to highlight it, that podcast that you did with me is my most downloaded podcast of all of them. Congratulations. Because it's an area that people, we have curiosity. Obviously, if we have a horse, we have a horse mouth, we have horse teeth that we're dealing with. And it's one of those literally shadow spaces where, if we just don't know what's going on in there, and, we can miss a lot of stuff. Even if we're trying to not miss it, we can miss it. And so, there's obviously a desire to learn some more about this area of things. And that's why I get Jackson on to chat more. And also because I love the connections of the teeth and the mouth to everything else. And I love hearing about that and understanding that a little bit more. So today, Jackson, getting into this idea of how important it is to address issues in the mouth. Can you share a little bit about that?
Okay. We talked about
so broad. You know where I'm going with this, I think.
No, yeah, because we talked about this a little bit prior, but it's kind of been a theme that I've come up against lots in the fall here, and it seems to be, well, there's been kind of, people are usually stuck in doing teeth in spring and fall, and I think that's kind of been when they've typically had done by vets. The vets are so busy doing everything else that they do a spring rush, and then they'll do set aside time in the fall. And lots of times it seems like the people in the spring are people that are going to be riding lots, and they want their horse to be just performing properly or not have any problems with bits or whatever. And then in the fall, it seems to be the older horses, and the older horses so they can eat. And then so that leads me into what I've come up against lots this fall, is seeing horses that probably should have seen a dentist, anybody, just to kind of know what was going on. Probably, I've said it a few times, if I would have seen this horse 10 years ago or 5 years ago, we wouldn't have a problem. It's just routine dental checks. A lot of these older horses, when you get into, they have missing teeth, and then protuberant teeth growing up from above or below if there's nothing opposing, or just missing a whole bunch of teeth, like 3-4 teeth. Mm-hmm. So when that starts happening, they just aren't able to eat. Like, you'll see a lot of them, I've noticed, and everyone's kind of said the same thing. They're awesome. They were good in the spring, summer, on the grass, no problems. Switched over to hay, and they just drop.
Yeah.
So they're not, obviously, if you see that in a horse, get their teeth checked. And even then, at that point, if they're not eating on the hay, unless you have grass year-round, you're going to have to switch up their diet. And I've seen big changes in just that. Recommended
in terms of like using cubes or like a soaked diet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just something that's a little bit easier to digest and soft, because you get some like coarser hay. That's when those horses they struggle and they don't maintain any weight at all, and it's not very good.
No, obviously not. And, going back to these cases that you've seen, have these horses had like veterinary, like have they been checked, or are they kind of just left like, oh, they seem to be doing all right? What are you noticing?
Sorry, I just had a call there. I had to decline it, so I missed what you were saying.
Jackson's on his phone tuning in today. I'm just wondering, for those horses that you're seeing with those types of issues, it sounds like, some of them are having some big stuff going on. Have they had, are they having regular veterinary checks, like oral examinations, or no?
I would guess in most of these instances, no.
Yeah.
Because, in probably, most of the cases I came across, they wouldn't have had anything too regular when that's, if they had, and even, no, if they just, nothing regular as far as we came across. And that's huge, because if I go through and do a horse and there's just a little problem, if we stay on top of that problem every year, if they're missing a tooth or something, it never becomes an issue, like a big issue. Like it's a small issue, like it's an issue, it's there, but we can
manage it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing too, is management, is just checking in there, because it doesn't take very long for problems to arise very quickly.
Right. And so how often, Jackson, would you recommend, at least doing an oral examination? I mean, I'm assuming once a year at least.
Yeah.
With those kind of horses, would you suggest doing more often?
The older ones, at that point, everything's kind of the tooth is coming to the end of its life anyways.
Yeah.
So once all that, in the older horses I've seen this year, that it was just beyond, as far as eruption rate, we were never going to fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll fix soft tissue damage. If something's poking them, yeah, that's easy to fix.
Yeah, like a hook or a point or something.
Yeah. It's just, at that point, it becomes less about biomechanics and just about comfort, which is fairly easy. But as far as biomechanics go, you're not going to correct it.
Yeah.
And then you get uneven wear on the teeth, and it just causes more problems.
Right.
To the body, to even just from eating to the body, muscle-wise and all that. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm dealing with stuff right now with my mare's 19. She's a pretty healthy specimen by majority, but she's been dealing with my first potential root of the tooth abscess, potentially, or like, can you speak a little bit to that in terms of what you see in the horses that you work with, and is that common to have? This is sort of a new thing for me, but apparently it's a thing.
Anything can happen. I mean, so things happen all the time.
Happen. Yes. And I mean, I'm assuming that by getting in the mouth, at least once a year, you're going to be able to track some of these things down that, maybe would go unchecked.
Yeah. And I know that I haven't found anything this year, but I have a couple colleagues from school. They've both found sticks that were wedged up in the mouth.
Yep.
So that's one of those things, like, if you notice something's off and they're not eating, like, it probably doesn't hurt to have their teeth checked, or if they're dropping weight, obviously, or like you said with your mare, she was starting to have some discharge from her nose, or anything, or you've noticed any swelling around there.
Yeah.
Because there can be that doesn't necessarily have to be a tooth problem. It can be like a foreign object can be stuck in there. You can get grasses stuck in there, seeds and sticks and
for sure. Well, and that's what I'm wondering about with Diva, because she seems to really like getting into the blackberry and rose bushes. So, like, thinking, it could be something interesting. So that's really helpful. I'm completely using you right now, as you can tell. But I'm certain that it will be helpful for other people. So for those of you out there, very good to check, like, for swelling even under the chin, which is where it's come up on Diva. Of course, I jumped to the conclusion, Jackson, being a total worrywart about my horse, that she was possibly dying from some sort of tumor. So I was actually quite relieved when I realized that it was an abscess instead. And I found out as well, everybody, because she smells terrible. Yeah. She smells like death. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can pop open their lips and look, and if you see anything there, or just the smell, that's
just
the biggest.
Take a little whiff. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I noticed on most horses the older ones here that I've gone up to. If there was a problem, right away I'd open the spec and I'd be like, yeah, something's not right.
Something's rotting.
It didn't end up being any like tissue issues, like any rotting teeth in there in these horses, but just the food packed in there.
Yeah.
It stinks.
The fermentation process was occurring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note, I've had experiences of horses being very compromised by teeth issues.
Yep. Yeah. Yes. No, that's exactly it. Some of those horses, it was very compromised, and just even how I think we were talking, or just even when you're kind of talking at the beginning here, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, that a lot of it gets passed over. Because the one horse that I'd seen, she had been to a vet and been looked at, and they never opened her mouth.
Right.
And that, I was like, okay, that's probably should be on your top 5 things, I would think.
Yeah.
checking, like other
Yeah.
blood work, and because I think they were talking about doing blood work and all that. I'm like, well, maybe pop open their mouth,
Yeah.
or have someone else. If you're not comfortable with whoever it is, then have someone that is more comfortable with doing it, or just you have to look at all the possibilities. And if they would have done that, it would have been cut and dry right there. This is the problem.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, I mean, there's the standard issues of like this horse isn't eating. That is not good for a horse. But you know, what else can go really wrong? Like I have seen it where something has gone sort of septic and been very, you know, gone a little bit more systemic. You know, is there anything else that you tend to see as far as ways that teeth stuff can go sideways?
Ooh, there's lots to that. I mean, they can cause so much problems to the body. I mean, like you were saying, the infection is a big thing too. If there was infection, you get in bone infect into the bone, and with it being so close to the head and everything, it's not. As far as those infections, yeah, you definitely don't want to parlay it or put it off any longer. You're noticing smells or anything, or discharges or too much. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we wouldn't really want a big infection on our head.
No.
I don't think. I think, you know, and it's that trick of like, at least with us, we can go, my tooth is really hurting.
Yes.
You know, punch it out and be like, there is something here. So, you know, with these horses, I'm assuming because they're with these older horses, it can be tricky because they're probably not ridden anymore.
No.
And so you're not seeing, you know, maybe a reaction when you're putting a bit in, or, you know, you're not grooming them as often. So you might not be getting that like pressure on that area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for those of you out there that have the older ones, it's good to, I know for myself, I'll often palpate down the, between the maxilla and the mandible, just to see if there's any reaction.
Yeah, and if you notice cheeks, if they're packing food in their cheeks or anything like that too, that's a pretty good sign. Or dropping a bunch of food too. For sure. Yeah, I've definitely seen that. Sometimes dropping feed is just because they're a pig. Yeah. Well, one of the symptoms Diva has as well is she's getting like runny eyes. So sinuses can obviously come in as an issue with that as well. So those just some of the clues to set you on to it being something potentially in the mouth. Yeah, and if all of a sudden the horse that wasn't head shy starts to become head shy, just or bad to halter or doesn't want to be caught. Because I have worked on a horse just this past summer that was like that. He was bad to be caught. And he would just, any little bump that wasn't perfect on his head, he would take off, and worked on him. And after, he was just relaxed. He was very on guard, just ready, like fight or flight. He was ready to go either way. Yeah. When I was working on him. And then once we got through, it was just returning biomechanics on this. It was a younger horse. And by the end of it, he stood there because when I went to go change halters, he just about got away from me. And by the end of it, he stood there and dropped his head down beside me, and I was swinging my arms all around his face, around his eyes, and he just stood there, and he couldn't afford any less. He just relaxed. He was just on high alert just because of pain in his mouth. And actually, then the next day, the lady went to catch him. She kind of bumped him funny and kind of walked away. So normally that would have been game over. He would have been hard to catch. He said she caught her other mare, and he just came up right beside that one and got caught. Wow. Yep. And then after, she came up and gave me a hug and said he was way different. So yay. That's good feedback. Yeah. Yeah. You do see that lots of behavioral issues too. And if all of a sudden they change, it's not necessarily, and I mean, now, when I think back to it, I've lots of horses that I was training and everything too. I would love to go back in time. I would love to have a time machine and go back and look in the mouth of certain horses I was riding, problem horses or anything. And I would guess that probably a good bunch of them probably had some sort of imbalance or something going on in there.
Yeah, for sure. And with this horse that was head shy and running away, what did you find?
It was a mess. I'm not sure. Oh, my cat's gonna jump up.
That's in our animals, hey?
I know. I never sit in one spot for very long, and now I'm sitting in a chair, and they're coming and checking me out. So, where was I going with that horse? He'd been worked on, but I'm not quite sure what they were trying to do. As far as the biomechanics, were all messed up, and it was just he had inverted angles, and it wouldn't have been comfortable. And some horses too I'm finding there's different sensitivities. Like some horses really just put up with whatever. They just put up with the pain and they go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other ones that they won't take anything less than perfect.
Yeah.
And this one, he had some bad angles. It was just not great as soon as I felt in his mouth, I knew that we could help him out. I didn't know if it would be that drastic, because you just never know. Sometimes if there's other underlying issues elsewhere in the body or what there is, or if it was a training issue or what, but in that instance, it went away.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, because I'm sure sometimes you find it like has residual of impact on, the temporomandibular joint or, other spots where it's referring.
Yes. Yeah. And then a lot of these horses too, if I can work on them unsedated by the end of it, a lot of those horses that are getting some pain relief, they look sedated. They've got their heads dropped down and they're zoned right out, or they're feeling good.
Yeah.
Usually my new best friend.
You can stick around.
Yes. I've had that where they sat there and they'll be watching after I'm done, and they'll be sitting in the stall beside me and just not take their eyes off me and just watch. And I'm like,
that's nice.
Yeah.
For those of us out there that don't know what an inverted angle is, would you go into that a little bit?
So typically how you get an inverted angle is when people get too focused on, like, I'm pretty sure I talked about it in the other podcast.
I think some of it, yeah.
And like I said, some of this is going to be sounding like a broken record, but people need to hear it over and over again, because I even have customers where I think they get it, and I kind of move on to other things, and then one day I'll show up and they're like, "Oh, we're sharp." Or they're sharp right here. And I'm like, no, it's not. That's not what we focus on at this point. I mean, it can be an issue.
Yeah.
It's not something you completely have to ignore, because it can be an issue. But if things are set up properly, we shouldn't have these sharp points.
Yeah.
So typically the sharp points, people are just focusing on the uppers along the cheek,
right,
and along the tongue on the bottom.
Yeah.
So, but those points are what they call sharp points. I call inclination, or the angle the tooth should be.
Okay.
There should be an angle to the tooth.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't be flat. So once you kind of start taking away those angles, like the points, that's flattening the angle and kind of inverting. And you can even get some that will even go beyond, even just flat, and will actually invert from the opposite angle. I've seen some of that too. And
right.
That's way out of whack as far as, and has to create insane amounts of pain in TMJ and their mouth.
Yeah, because of all the pressure.
Well, because I mean, you can talk with people that have had teeth like a crown or something. If there's a little spot that's too high, and you're right, we can feel it right away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
totally.
The horses don't tell us if we got that, so they get away with.
Yeah, for sure. And when people have jaw stuff, they're like, I know, like with my osteo, they come in and they're going, I need help. Like there's a real feeling there of, that particular side, especially if they have like a disc displacement or something, they're clicking. it's very painful and there's a lot of pressure. And, I know for myself, I fully occlude on my right, but not on my left in my
Yep.
molars. And that makes a really big difference.
Totally.
And I, I have fairly straight teeth otherwise, but I can feel that in terms of my temporomandibular joint and, what's happening in there. So I can only imagine for some horses what they're working with.
Yeah, and it's always clients that I have too, if they've had TMJ problems. As soon as I start talking about issues in the horse or just explaining occlusion and all that, they're like, yeah, they fully get it. Those are some of my best.
Yeah, well, when you've
Because they
experienced
understand
that pain, then you don't want anybody else to have to be dealing with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, and I got whacked in the head, whacked in the TMJ by a horse a month ago, so I know how it hit her.
Dear, is it okay now?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I was actually checking his TMJ right after I was done, and he whacked me. So
I see the irony in it all, really.
yeah.
I have nothing wrong with mine, but you now have something wrong with yours. Yeah.
No, it clicked and it popped, and I was like, oh, that's either a good thing or it's gonna really hurt. So.
And so what happened?
No, I was all right.
It was okay.
Yeah, a little bit of bruising, but
it wasn't anything too bad. Horses have very, very, very hard heads.
Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I just did a course on facial bones. I don't know if that was something you went into a lot with the work that you did in terms of like maxilla and mandible relationships. I don't know if there's anything that me, I always want to just learn more about the anatomy piece because it's the horse side of it is something that I'm continuing to learn about. Yeah.
I mean, as far as for me, facial bones are more, I think, I don't know if I touched on it in the podcast or the webinar.
Right.
About the reproduction, kind of what I'm working on is kind of a thesis, or me and another friend of mine from school are kind of working on, was the cranial nerve that was going down.
Right.
In right, it's nerve terminalis or cranial nerve 0, which when I've asked other people about, you don't find a whole lot of information. I have talked to. I was
going to say, yeah, it's new.
I finally I know a really good cranial sacral worker out here, works on horses, and I asked her about it, and she actually did know about it. She gave me some really good information in kind of what I'm kind of supporting what I'm saying or what I'm seeing I had 4 mares that I worked on this year, just kind of as a little test group to find out if my theory is working. And it's what I've kind of come down to is a certain abnormality in incisors is affecting this nerve terminalis, because it looks to end just above your upper incisors, and it controls the phlegm response, which is taking in pheromones tied to the reproductive system, and I can't remember what all the other things that it was on, but reproduction is what I'm kind of focusing on at the moment, and it seems to be working. Out of the 4 horses, the 4 mares that I worked on, every single one had caught after the next breeding. So
amazing. So the premise of the work that you're doing is that by balancing the incisors, it brings more health to this cranial nerve?
It's still pretty preliminary as far as everything's going, but it's just been kind of cool. And I'm seeing a similarity between most. When one of the mares just had her mouth was just jacked up. There was problems everywhere, and I think if you're compromised there, and that's compromising your TMJ and just nerves and everything, it's just without a healthy mouth. I think it's to be the same as for humans too. Without a healthy mouth, you're going to be compromised, and it's probably going to be hard for reproduction.
Yeah. And
then 3 of the other ones, as far as molars went, they were pretty good, and there wasn't any big issues that I noticed. It was all incisors, and all 3 of them had the exact same thing that I was looking at. So that was kind of interesting to see. So hopefully,
Wow. And
I
what
can
do you notice like about their incisor and their mouths? Like,
on these ones, it was kind of, they weren't getting a full occlusion. There was a little bit of, I want to describe it as a cupping kind of. You kind of had an edge on the front and an edge on the back, but the center of the tooth, just trying to describe this, it just wasn't getting a full occlusion, which wasn't touching. That's roughly what I've found right now. I don't know if we'll see how this year goes and if I can get some more horses if that continues on, but it's just something to kind of, I'm trying to take notice of.
yeah, fantastic. I'll have to look that up because that's the nerve terminalis is something that I haven't really seen. So I'll give it a check out. Does it come through like, so it's obviously in the maxilla or comes through? Yeah. Ha! Wow. Do we have that too?
That's what we're trying to kind of, because even I was talking about it, and one of my friends, I think she must have been her gynecologist or something, she was talking to, and actually she mentioned it, just wondering if they had found anything. He didn't know anything, but he said he was very interested in it and wanted to follow up. It would make, if it's, because a lot of the nervous system nerves, we just have different shaped heads and whatnot, or bodies, but it's all very, very similar.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even if you look at the cranial bones, it's incredibly similar how they're put together, yeah. I had a moment in the woods the other day because I found a deer cranium and I was like full on geeking out on this deer cranium and like found its like atlas and occiput and like axis, and I was like, whoa. My friend was shaking his head going, all right. I'm like, I'm taking this one home. But it's pretty neat to see the different, like for the functions. This little deer one had tiny little horns. It was so cute. But for those of you out there that are interested, horse craniums are fascinating. And there's a lot going on in there for sure. Yeah. Do you find, Jackson, like, I find in my work, like a lot of horses have hit their heads on things. Do you find any, or have you seen any connection between, say, a horse that has impacted themselves, let's say occiput, parietals, frontal, nasal, like, which are the general areas where they might smoke themselves, that might cause some occlusion issues or changes in the teeth or the jaw?
Usually not. I've seen some horses that have suffered some pretty sustainable injuries to their head.
Yeah.
When you look at it and you would think this mouth is going to be a mess.
Yeah.
And usually then you check in there and they're usually okay. Unless there's like a direct impact to the teeth, then usually it stays pretty good. Because there was one horse, a 3-year-old that I worked on this spring, and I don't know, or it was he'd had a big dish on the one side of his face, and I thought he'd had a big accident. Apparently it's just a certain line of these quarter horses. They give that trait, which is lovely. And I looked at him and I was thinking, oh wow, if that's how he was born, I was thinking it was going to cause problems in his teeth, his molar tables and whatnot. And nope, they were completely fine. So,
amazing.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw it. I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And so, not saying that it can't.
Yeah.
But there are lots of times when you see injuries to heads and the teeth are okay.
Yeah.
Or no big problems.
Horses are fairly resilient, and especially if it happened when they were younger, I'm sure the fusion of the bones there might have been more adaptability there, because it takes some time for things to actually fully, come into place, so to speak. Yeah, that's really cool, and I'm sure it's also a little bit to do with. Because I've seen cranial injuries where I'm like, oh my God, this should be a big deal. And they're like, the horse is totally fine and happy and, doing their thing. They're yeah, and others where it's like much more impactful, generally more centrally. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting. That's cool. Any other, interesting cases that you've had lately?
There's always lots of interesting cases. I'm trying to think. Nothing that pops out instantaneously in my mind.
Yeah.
I deal with lots of, for me, I deal with lots of horses that are well fed up and they
Yeah.
look good, and we don't really have, don't have too many big transformations lately.
Yeah. That's pretty nice though, to have that during the winter out there, and, that,
Yeah.
Horses are being well taken care of, and things. And
Yeah.
for you, with your work, I'm sure you see what, like if you're working in a horse, now that you've gotten a few years under your belt here, what are you noticing as far as progressions to be able to have worked on a horse, say 3 years in a row or whatnot? What are you seeing?
Once they achieve that balance and we can get those angles and inclination right and the guidance with the incisors to the TMJ, the balance stays. The balance maintains, and it's so much easier for me to work on versus the first time you come in and there's quite a bit of work. But it's so cool to come back and you're seeing some of these horses that I've worked on 4 times, some of them now, and it's just little tiny adjustments, and it's nice. And when that's maintaining, that's how the mouth needs to be, or everything's all systems are working, functioning properly.
And tell me, is there ever a time where you're like, there's something else going on?
Yeah, actually there was a mare earlier that I worked on last year, and we came back. She didn't have this one particular problem in her mouth, and when I checked, she had her ATR, the ridging. She didn't have it before, and then then all of a sudden she had it. Because if their balance was pretty good before, and then all of a sudden you come back and something's gone wrong with the balance, and it's usually asking, did the horse have an injury? Did we get something go wrong? Because as much as the mouth influences the body influences
well,
the
exactly.
Mouth.
Yeah.
And she had lost a bunch of top line, and so there was, I think I'm not sure I really followed up on it, but they were having chiropractor out and looking at her back and whatnot. So.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to ask about is, we've talked a little bit about how the teeth influence the body, but then, the other side of the coin, right? Like you're talking about with her, where there's something obviously having an effect on her teeth. Yeah,
and because I know lots have been coming up, or maybe I'm more aware of it now, is hyoid issues. You'll put people out and they're like, oh, my horse is chewing funny. So we'll go through, and lots of times too, if we go to work on those horses, their tongue's pretty sensitive, and you kind of have a pretty good idea that hyoid is an issue.
Yeah.
Some, not always, but definitely that's what I'll recommend people if they kind of send me a video or something that I'd look, and if they're chewing just kind of funny, I'm like, if you're having someone out before I can get there, have them check the hyoid.
Yep.
More often than not, it's definitely, I think that's a pretty big issue I'm aware of now, more so than I used to be. I didn't even know what the hyoid was for a while.
Well, now that you have that knowledge, can you share with the listeners about the hyoid bone? It's one of my favorites.
Well, the hyoid controls your tongue and all that, but then the hyoid, as you know, is connected. You have from your tongue all the way down through your shoulders to your front feet, and it even is connected to your hind end, your sacrum, and all that. So just little issue there, and you've got big issues elsewhere in the body. And they're just tiny, fragile little bones, and they can cause a whole lot of problems.
Absolutely, because they're essentially in osteo, we think of them as they're balancing the fascial chains in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And when they get pulled off center, it can really uncenter the rest of the system. Plus like the connections up into all the fascia of the throat and the tongue and the back of the neck. So you can sometimes even get pulls up into the upper cervicals and into the pole as well. So yeah, it's pretty, for a little guy,
Yeah.
it can do a lot.
Well, and that's one of the things too with when people are getting teeth done, of looking for things that you want and don't want. You need to be aware of people really pulling on that tongue too, because some people will take the tongue and just crank it way out to the side and either side or anything. If too much, I mean, those bones are so fragile. I mean, I know you can reset hyoids, but there's a difference between holding and pulling.
Yeah, for sure. You do not want to break a hyoid bone. That is for sure. No, so it's not ideal. Yeah, and one of the easiest ways to get a positive test from my work is if you go up and under the mandible, so the big jawbone, come right, your fingers right to the inside edge, and then just gently push up. If there's a positive result, generally they'll throw their head a little bit or fuss a little bit. You can do that on either side. And get an idea of what's going on in there. So that's
one of the things I will, if it's suspected, I'll kind of check, and like you just said, they will pop their head up. And I've had some that you put it up in there and then I just held it, and then they actually did. This one mare rested her head down onto me, and then after she looked and chewed, I mean, it probably helped reset it a little bit.
Totally. Yeah, and they will sometimes even just lean on us for a little bit of a tension release in there, which is a good thing. If they're open to that, then we can help them out with that a little bit. But if you're not comfortable with that, I would suggest, I think Jackson and I both would suggest having a really good recommended body worker coming out and working on your horses and making sure that's all happy.
Yes, and that's another thing kind of just reminded me of, it's not just necessarily teeth, but it's a good thing to have a good team of people that you trust. I've seen some horses just recently where now we've changed programs, or changed feet, changed the body work, changed teeth, and horses have completely changed. Like it was one of my friend's older horses. He's an older show horse, cutting horse, and he all of a sudden just started to become lame. And so she took him out of the program he was in and changed up feet, changed up obviously teeth because I'm doing it, and then we changed up body work. And now that horse, who normally would be, I would say he probably should have been retired if nothing had changed, he's now back to competing and doing the best. Like, I've known this horse since he was a 3-year-old. I think he's 12, 13 now, and he's moving some of the best I've seen him go. So it's teamwork. As much as I would love to say I have all the answers, I don't.
No, absolutely. Well, and not only that, it's like even like having the right vet, like all these things, like, it's important to have like that group that you trust, that support network. I don't generally do body work on my own mare, so it's like I'm a little bit biased, and so I'll do some, but I'll have someone come out and work with her because they're going to get information that I don't necessarily get. So yeah, for sure. That's awesome. It's like such a simple thing, but it's really important to highlight, just to make sure that you've got people around you that you really trust and feel good about. And because you could give a horse a whole new lease on life if you potentially.
Yeah. Well, I guess that kind of, like, wanting to talk about just what to even, for people to look for, what to even ask as far as getting a proper dentist or someone on your team. That's the biggest thing. Just to have anybody isn't necessarily going to have the same achievements, I guess, in the end with it. So, because I've actually had a client say this to me, because there's a school of thought with some dentists and traditional dentistry that you don't need to touch incisors.
Yeah.
And then one of my clients said, or kind of brought up, like, well, would you go to a dentist, like a human dentist? And be like, oh, we're just going to forget about these 6 teeth in the front of your mouth. Those are fine. We don't need to touch those.
Yeah. Yeah.
When that happens with horses all the time.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much is missed just even in incisor wear and everything. So if you're going to the dentist and they're not ignoring your incisors, either your horse shouldn't be going to a dentist either that is ignoring incisors.
Right.
And then from there, even if you start hearing too much of a focus on sharp points,
yeah,
that's too much of it. Maybe and I've heard even this year, there was one horse who had just been done, and all they focused on was sharp points, and it said they didn't want to touch the chewing surface of the tooth, which I agree with to a point. It can't be ignored, and this was ignored, and there was huge ATR ridging down the tooth, down. Yeah. So your occlusion is in the movement of their jaw. Like, yes, they didn't have any sharp points along their tongue or along their cheek, but along the body of the tooth, there was massive ATR.
Yeah.
So that jaw was locked up. Actually, I had a before and after picture of this mare, just from when I started to the end of working. And whole body, your top line lifted up, her pelvis relaxed, her head came down,
wow,
stood up underneath herself. And this was a horse that had been said was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think I've been apprehensive a little bit about the grinding surfaces, because my sense of like the power tools and stuff is that they may not get, like, do you know what I mean? Like they might not have as much ability to be sensitive to what's in the mouth. And so
you can go too far too quick.
Yeah.
That's kind of, so what I'm doing, or what we're doing in school, is kind of, I would say, in between the two groups, I guess. There's kind of, and we do touch the surface, but we're not going to make that smooth. We're leaving angle there and just adjusting enamel folds just above the body of the tooth. Feels kind of like sandpaper.
Yeah.
So there should be some texture. And then there's another level beyond us, like the people that use power tools, or overuse, I shouldn't say. There's people that use them and do a proper job.
Yeah.
I don't want to bash everybody and say that just because you have power tools, just because I don't do it, I'm not going to bash it. So,
yeah, totally.
But if you go too far with that, then I kind of get where the one train of thought is they don't want to touch the grinding surface because you don't want to do too much. But like I said, you can't fully ignore it, and you can't do too much to it too, because then that creates its own set of problems.
Right.
From there.
Yeah. That's actually super helpful, because I think I was under some illusions around that. So I very much appreciated it. I'm sure if I was, then there's other people out there that also, and just to know what to look for. Is there anything else that you recommend looking for with someone who's doing teeth? So making sure they're touching into the incisors, making sure that they work with, not only the sharp points, but also grinding surfaces in not in a good balance.
Yep.
Anything else?
Let's see. Giving horses breaks too in between while you're working, and you never want flat and smooth. That's kind of a hard one to get.
Yeah.
If you felt flat and smooth, too much has been done, and you're going to have to wait a while. Or with that, actually, we do get flat and smooth. We do come across that where teeth have been brought down too much, and when there is some vibration, that's why I will leave some texture, because the texture causes vibration, and the vibration causes proper eruption.
Right.
So if you take away that texture, we can do vibrational therapy. I think I mentioned it, I'm not sure.
I think so.
Podcast or webinar.
Yeah.
We're getting all connected in a bunch of things now.
Who knows?
but it's always good information to hear. So yeah, we do have gone too far, and if I check horses that their occlusion is not optimal, or if there isn't anything to work on in the mouth as far as I go, you can do vibrational therapy. So just take clippers and hold them on the jaw, on their head, and that vibration will help erupt the tooth. We'll have teeth erupt out.
Interesting.
So then I can come in. So you do that 30 times. It doesn't have to be 30 days in a row, 30 sessions for like 15, 20 minutes, I think, or 5 minutes. Anything, if that vibration is going to help.
Yeah.
The tooth erupting, or even putting the horse in the trailer and they go bouncing around in there, it's going to help them.
It's good to know.
Yes, that's also good, because we do come across that thinking, because sometimes when it has gone too far, there is damage to that tooth, and if left on its own, it won't come back, or it'll take years and years. I've felt some that they hadn't been done in 3 years, and it felt like their teeth had been done yesterday, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Okay. So some things to look for. And
And also, ask questions.
Ask questions. Okay.
Just, that is the biggest thing too. People is questioning what they're doing. Don't just trust because you have someone.
Yeah.
Ask around or ask other people's opinions on who they have, and just for anything, as far as anything to go with, just ask a question. It's not, you shouldn't.
Yeah. No, and isn't it funny how we like just don't, like we get nervous about like that maybe we're going to I don't know, upset someone or whatnot, but we are the steward of our animals, so like we're their advocate.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a really great point. I know I fall into that trap too, where I don't, I'm like, okay, I'm sure it'll be fine. Like I'll deal with the fallout later because I'm too uncomfortable to ask questions. It's like, that's not helpful.
No, and I've had people definitely that wish they would have asked questions, or even have asked other people questions and got educated, because yes, things that have happened to horses, and something happened, they got their teeth worked on, and then that was it. It was horses die or problem arise that can't be fixed.
That's a big deal. Mm-hmm.
And the thing too with teeth is you want to make sure you're not doing too much. As far as like feet, that hoof is always going to continually grow through that horse's leg. Tooth, there's a finite amount of tooth, and once we've done too much, then that is it, unfortunately. So
right,
it's important to like I said before, just stay on top and try and keep everything in line, and it makes my life a whole lot easier. And actually, I've mentioned it to some of my clients because people ask if I give discounts, and I'm like, well, if you've stayed with me from the beginning, whatever price you're at, I try to honor that price if you have me back every year.
Yeah.
If you go and then there's a 3-year gap where you have me once every 5 years and my price has gone up, you're now at the new price.
Yeah.
So that's kind of trying to reward people to stay.
For being consistent. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. Well, we're running out of time here. See, Look at you. We filled up that hour, no problem. Just wanted to share with everyone that Jackson is one of the guest instructors on the Whole Horse Apprenticeship. So he did a webinar last year that was awesome. So if you want to learn more from him, that is within the Whole Horse Apprenticeship program starting March 15th. And Jackson, how do people get in touch with you?
You have Facebook's easy.
Yeah, Jackson Holm.
And then I have a closed Facebook group on there. There's JH Equine.
Yep.
I have a Facebook page, or like a business page, but I don't really post too much on that. I like to keep in my group a little bit more controlled, I guess. Maybe that says something about me. And my email is for the business is jhequine00@gmail.com. And phone number 403-888-1250. Text me. If anybody's got questions, I will answer them or try my best, or at least refer to my group of people I've gone to school with, and we can usually figure it out.
Fantastic. Really appreciate that.
And I don't, if any questions, like I said, not question people. I like it when people ask me questions, because then they are actually, I know that they're thinking about what's going on and not just, I appreciate if you just trust me, but I also really like it if you ask me questions too, because then I know you're paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, both for me and Jackson, I'm sure, you know, healthy skepticism is a good thing. So if you have questions about the work that we do, then get in touch. So thanks, Jackson, for being open to that. That's great. We're all learning around here. So that really, really helps. And who knows, maybe we'll do this again sometime.
I'm sure we will.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today and taking the time out of your day to listen. And we will be back soon. I'm off to Australia, so it might be a little while. So enjoy this one, and we'll see you in a bit. Okay. Have a great day.